Can I go out and being I'm already out of order over here? Can I just go ahead and give you the title? Is that all right? I already gave it to you. You didn't realize it. That's how slick I am. Here's the title. You ready? Use his name. Somebody say, use his name. You know how we like to name drop? Like, I know such and such. We need to be dropping the name Jesus. Y'all know what I'm saying? I know Jesus. And if you know Jesus, you know help. You know hope. You know victory. You know grace. You know breakthrough. You know salvation. Somebody say, I know Jesus. High five your neighbor and say, use his name. And then sit down. Somebody's like, wow, he letting us sit down early. That's only because I believe you're going to be standing up early. I got a word for you. Listen, last week we started this conversation. Just take your Bibles and turn with me to Acts chapter 3, verses 1 through 10. Hey, I'm glad that half of y'all showed up with the bad weather outside. The other half sitting at the house watching online. Y'all gonna miss it because we're giving out money at the end of service. I'm just gonna let y'all know. All the people in the house say amen. Jesus, forgive me for telling a lie. I'm just saying. But we started this conversation last week. He brings the ingredients. Where we were looking at the first miracle that Jesus performed. And I had no intentions of this becoming a series, but I did feel like it would be at least a 2-week deal, which kind of is a series. And it may morph into more than just 2 weeks. It may morph into 3. It may morph into 4. I don't know. We're going to see where this goes. But we were talking about the miracle of Jesus turning water into wine, the very first miracle that Jesus performed. It was the miracle at the wedding of Cana. What's cool about that miracle, I believe, personally speaking, that it's the most miraculous of all miracles. Why? Because all of the ingredients that were needed for this miracle to take place were not present when the miracle happened. In other words, there was some water, there was some jars containing the water, but there were no grapes. I need you to hear me. Jesus, when he performed this miracle, did not cause there to be more wine. He caused there to be wine. He didn't take a little wine and multiply it so that it became a lot of wine. He took water without grapes and called something that was not as though that it was. All of the other miracles, as incredible as his miracles are, all of the ingredients were present. When he fed the 5,000, he multiplied the fish and the loaves that were there. When he healed the blind dude, he had eyes. He just healed his eyes so that he could see. When he called Lazarus out of the grave, the ingredients was in his body. But in this case, the grapes were absent, but yet Jesus called something that was not as though it was. It harkens back to the very creation story. Why? Because John's gospel, Kevin, is trying to show us that Jesus is God in the flesh. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form, and darkness hovered over the face of the deep, and his spirit hovered over the face of the water, and there was darkness, and so he said there needs to be light. So he said, let there be, and out of nothingness came light. He has the ability to transform things. So out of the nothingness of water came wine. But the story was not just about transforming the water into wine. The story was also about transforming Simon into Peter. Because if you'll remember last week, Simon was sitting there watching this miracle take place. And just before the miracle happens, Jesus walks up to Simon and he says, hey, aren't you Simon? Yeah, I'm Simon. Well, you will be Peter. That says a lot. Why? Because names in that culture meant something. The name Simon meant shifting sand. It meant blowing like the wind. But Peter, Cephas, means the rock. He was saying to Simon, you are Simon now, but I'm going to make you into the rock. I'm going to drop some ingredients in you, and pretty soon you're going to be like Rocky. Somebody say like Rocky. So this story was not only about the transformation of water into wine, it was about the transformation of Simon into Peter. You see, God has a way of declaring things over your life. And what he calls you, you may not be that in the moment, but he brings the ingredients. He brings the ingredients. There are things in your life, places that you've been in your life, you couldn't figure out how you were going to get out of them. You didn't think you had the talent. But then all of a sudden came Jesus. He brings the ingredients. So I want to stay in that same vein of conversation, but I want to fast forward a little bit. I want to move through the life of Jesus. Jesus has already gone to heaven. He's ascended into heaven. And now Peter has become Cephas, has become the rock. This is the very first miraculous moment that Peter will experience. So we saw the first miracle of Jesus. This will be the first miracle of Peter. And there's some things that take place that I want us to see. Some things that happen in this narrative that I think we can relate to if we really dial down on it. So let me just read a few verses. And as I'm reading these verses, I want you to live inside of this text. I want you to forget about what happened yesterday. I don't want you to think about tomorrow. I don't want you to think about this text in comparison to your life as far as a lame dude being healed, which you're going to see. But I want you to see God using you to transform your environment. Can I get an amen? So let me just read a few things and then we'll offer some constructive conversation. Here's what happens beginning in chapter 3. Acts chapter 3, this book that is written by Luke the physician. If you're at verse 1, say, I'm there. Look at your neighbor and say, you need to get there. Here's what happens in chapter 3, Acts verse 1 says, one day Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 p.m. There's a lot being said historically in that verse that I don't have time to conversate on. I will touch on it in a few minutes, but they're going to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 p.m. Verse 2, now a man who was lame, someone say lame, from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful. Someone say Beautiful. Where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. Why? Because what better place to go and to get help than the church? Can I get a witness? Y'all gonna make me preach up in here, I'm just saying. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for money. Peter looked straight at him, as did John. Then Peter said, look at us. So the man gave them his attention, expecting to get something from them. Now, I want you just to follow me here. Take your eyes off of your Bibles just for a moment, because I'm only going to read so far. I don't want to read past a certain point in this verse, and I don't want you to read ahead. Spoiler alert, okay? A couple of years ago, I preached out of this passage of Scripture, but God showed me something fresh in this passage, in this verse specifically for today. It says this in verse 6. Then Peter said, silver or gold I do not have, comma. Hold on a second. Silver or gold I do not have, comma. I think so often in life we tend to take that comma, we pull out our eraser, we erase the comma, and we place a period. Think about that with me for a moment. Silver and gold I do not have. Right out of the gate, Peter starts with a limitation. Right out of the gate, Peter begins to expound upon what he does not have. This is Peter on the way to the temple at the time of prayer. He runs into a lame dude. There's an opportunity for the gospel to happen right here in this moment. And Peter says, silver and gold I do not have, comma. Right here in this moment, this is the same Peter. He's about to be challenged. Why? Because this is the same Peter who started to walk on the water but couldn't finish it. This is the same Peter who denied even knowing Christ, and here he has an opportunity. And he starts out noting the limitation that he has. Silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have. Hold on. Don't go any further than that. Silver and gold I do not have. Think with me for a moment. I want you to live inside of this, because remember, there's a transformation that's taking place in the life of Peter. There's also a transformation that's taking place in your life. I want you to live here. I want you to see this passage of Scripture, because I think that in this moment, he says, silver and gold I do not have. What was it that the man wanted? What was it that the man thought that he needed? He thought that he needed money. And right out of the gate, Peter says, I don't have what it is that you think you need. He begins to express his limitation. He begins to somewhat make an excuse. You could easily, if you didn't know where this story was going, you could believe that Peter was beginning to make an excuse for not being able to meet the man's need. If you didn't know, if you didn't read ahead, if you hadn't heard about this story, you would think, oh, here's the same old Peter. He's about to give this lesson as to why he can't. This is an excuse. Silver and gold I do not have. I almost called this message, Stop with the Lame Excuses. Y'all get it? Lame dude? Excuses. You'll get it when you get home, I think. Here's this excuse. I mean, Peter, he's known for excuses. I mean, here's this opportunity. If you didn't know how the story plays out, you would think that there's a limitation that he's offering. We do the same thing. Silver and gold I do not have. Time I do not have. Energy I do not have. Forgiveness I do not have. Money I do not have. Grace I do not have. How often are we using excuses to not be obedient to the things that God is calling us to do? How often do we look at an endeavor that God puts before us, but we use an excuse? How often do we look at a situation, but we become sarcastic? Thanks, Sam. Think about this with me for a moment. Excuses. Certainly, we're reading into the text a little bit because we know how the text ends, but Peter's life has been one where he's used excuses not to meet the demand of the need that's in front of him. We have to think that in this moment, this dude who's been lame since birth, we don't know how long he's been laying at the temple every day, but we do know that he's been lame since birth. There has to have been some times in his life that he's made excuses as to why not to even go to the temple gate called Beautiful. Because it doesn't help anyway. No one seems to help me. My situation doesn't get any better. And how many of you know sometimes we can make some excuses? I mean, the reason why I'm not really good at my job is because my boss is a micromanager, and because my boss is a micromanager, he's always on top of me, keeps his thumb on top of me, so I can't perform the way I need to perform. Excuses. We make excuses as to how we parent and how we raise our kids. Well, my parents did it that way, and their parents did it that way, and their parents did it that way, and therefore I do it that way. What if it's not the right way? We make excuses. When my kids were in school, I would make excuses as to not help them with their homework. I'm getting a little transparent here. I didn't want to help with homework. I didn't like helping with homework. I thought they needed to do it themselves. They needed to learn. I didn't get involved in the homework. You know what I'm saying? Some of y'all are like, I cannot believe this. I can't believe. Yeah, because some of y'all, you do all your kids' homework. Kim might have helped with the homework, but I didn't help with the homework. And I'd come up with a good excuse. They'd say, Dad, can you help me with this homework? What subject matter is it? History. Well, I'm not a historian. I'm a theologian. I can't help you with that. Dad, can you help me with my homework? What subject is it? Math. Well, I'm a communicator, not a calculator. We tend to make excuses in life based upon our strengths and our weaknesses. And there's nothing wrong with that. We do have strengths, we do have weaknesses, but sometimes we take our strengths and our weaknesses and we allow them to begin to dictate our life and our involvement in things. And that thought process kind of migrates its way over to our faith. And we begin to make decisions in our faith based upon our strength and weaknesses rather than His strength. We begin to make excuses about what we're not going to be involved in because that seems to be much greater than my abilities. Well, that's what's called faith. Somebody say, Let's look at this a little bit deeper. And while at the same time we look at this, I want you to think, sometimes our excuses cause us to have unrealized faith opportunities. So remember that. Let me show you something. Look at verse 1. I want to look at this a little bit deeper. Verse 1 says, one day Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 p.m. Notice something about Peter and John. Prayer is familiar to Peter and John. Prayer, they're going up to the temple at the time of prayer. They're following one of their Jewish customs. They're going to the temple at the time of prayer, which is 3 o'clock. They did not go to the temple at the time of sacrifice, which is 2 o'clock. Why did they not go to the temple at the time of sacrifice? I thought everybody would shout the answer. Thank you for audience participation. They did not go at the time of sacrifice because the greatest sacrifice had already been made, Jesus Christ. They did go at the time of prayer. Why? Because prayer was familiar to them. And the more that I thought about the very concept of familiarity, I began to have this other thought that sometimes things can become so familiar to us that we forget their meaning and their value. You can do something over and 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 over, and one time you greatly appreciated it, but pretty soon you forget how valuable it was to you. I mean, you could come to church every week and like, whoo, yeah, but then after a while, you come to church and check the box, but you forget why you're coming to church. You come to church to check the box, but you forget what it is that God is trying to do in you through church. Can I go one step further? Can I get up in your business just a little bit more? Don't let what is familiar rob you of appreciation. Grab it. Don't let what becomes familiar rob you of appreciation. Don't let what becomes familiar to you rob you of an opportunity. Peter could have easily said, you know what, prayer's familiar to me. I got to go pray, man. You're on your own right now, dude. I'm going to commune with the Lord. Because sometimes we think being spiritual is the thing that we need to do, but what is your spirituality worth if it's not impacting those that are around you? I need some help up in here. It's lonely up on this stage. Somebody say, help, help. Let me go somewhere. I think sometimes we're really good at showing value in retrospect. Think about this with me. Why is it that we show value to something or someone when they're gone? We're really good about that. We're really good about showing value to something once it's gone, to someone once it's gone, to a ministry when it's over, to a job when it ends or when you lose it. We're really good about showing value in retrospect when we should be good about showing appreciation in real time. Sometimes we can grow so familiar with things that we miss the opportunities. We grow so familiar with things that we miss the opportunities today that unlock our tomorrow. Each day is interconnected, and what we do today has a great impact on what happens tomorrow. And we wonder why God's not showing up in our tomorrow. Well, God has shown up today several times, but yet you didn't see it because you're just so focused on what's familiar. So sometimes we just make excuses. Somebody say excuses. But then there's something else happening in this narrative. In verse 2, look at verse 2. Put up verse 2. Verse 2 says this, now a man who was lame from birth. Luke, in the book of Acts, is setting up the environment. Someone say the environment. Now a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every single day to beg from those who were going into the temple courts. Many times our excuses come from the environment that we establish. Grab that. You need to write that down if you're taking notes. Excuses come from the environment that we establish. So let's set the environment for this miracle. Because Luke tells us that this man is in this position. He's been stuck in this position. Let me kind of act out this position, if you don't mind. He's just kind of been laying around every day for years. Just laying there. This is the environment. Alms for the poor. Anybody got any silver or gold? The environment. The environment is one that he's dependent upon someone else to get to this place. The environment is before there's wheelchairs. In order for him to move somewhere, he's got to move himself. He's got to figure it out. Or he's got to call out to another friend on the other side. Hey, Fred, can you come and move me, man? Because the sun's in my face, and I want to move to the other side over there. Seems to be a little more productive over there. I saw you get a few more coins than I got. Hang with me. It's all right to have fun in church. Y'all know what I mean? The environment. The environment. You know, it's easy to judge someone else's excuses when you don't know their environment. Some of y'all are judging other people based upon what's happening, going on in your life, when you have no idea of what's been happening, going on in their life. The environment. Someone say the environment. And the environment is one where he's just kind of laying back, you know, looking at life from this perspective. He's in a place called what? Beautiful. But his life's not beautiful. In this moment, his life is anything but beautiful. His life's not together. In this moment, his life is anything but together. In this environment. He's lame and he can only talk to other lame people. Hey, Fred, what you gonna do today, man? I'm gonna just hang out right here, I guess. Yeah, me too. I mean, that's really the extent of his conversation. He's hanging out with other lame people, and his conversations are centered around his environment. His excuses are the byproduct of his environment. But yet, Peter's wanting to do something in his life that's more than just support him in his environment. Think about this with me for a moment. The environment that Peter is living in is an environment of prayer. The environment that this dude is living in is an environment of begging. When the two environments collide, there is this opportunity for God to do something incredible. And then the more that I thought about this narrative, I thought this narrative is really more about purpose than it is position. Because the man is in this position asking for alms for the poor, wanting someone to throw him some change. alms for the poor. This is the position that he finds himself in. He places himself at the temple gates. Why? Because this is the place that hopefully somebody will bless him. It's about position. And so many times I talk to people and they'll say, man, I just want to be in the right position to be blessed. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody in here, you want to be in the right position to be blessed? You know what I'm saying? Raise your hand. Just help me out. Where's the rest of y'all? I mean, what y'all? But can I tell you something? It's not position that causes blessing in your life. It's purpose. Blessing doesn't follow position. Blessing follows purpose. When you begin to live on purpose, you'll be in the right position, and that's when blessing happens. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, use his name. I want to prophesy over someone, over everyone. I believe this week if you'll begin to live on purpose. I believe if you'll live on purpose this week, watch and see what God's going to do in the position that you're in. Live on purpose this week and watch what God will do in the position that you're in. You see, what's the purpose for that job that you have? You see, that purpose for that job that you have has really nothing to do with money. You think you're there just to make money. And there's certainly nothing wrong with making money, but that's not the purpose of that job. That's just one of many byproducts of that job. You see, if God's purpose for you was just to make money, then he'd make it rain at your house. He'd cause you to win the lottery. He calls you to walk into an inheritance. So it's just obvious to me that your job is more than just you making money. There's a purpose for your job. Are you living on purpose in your job? Because I think sometimes we place a higher value on position than we do purpose. You can come to church every single week and hear a message that God is giving you, but unless you live it on purpose, your position will not change. So you've got excuses, you've got environment, and then you got something else in verse 3. Watch this. It says, when he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for money. Keep going. Peter looked straight at him, as did John. Then Peter said, look at us. So the man gave them his attention, expecting. Circle that, expecting. Expectation is powerful. He was expecting something. There's excuses, there's environment, there's expectation. He was expecting something. He probably held his hand out and said, alms for the poor. He was expecting something. You see, I need someone to hear this because I believe some of you have allowed your environment to keep you from expecting what it is that God is going to do in your life. And the reason for it is because of the altitude that you're riding at. Hold on a second. It's tough to expect a lot when this is your position. I don't mean physically speaking. I mean when you find yourself at the low place and you continue to hang out in the low place, you lose your ability to expect much. I need you to grab this because sometimes it's the lowliness of where we're riding that robs us of expectation. I think it's the lowliness of where we've allowed the weariness of where we are to cause us to have this perspective in life. And we don't expect much anymore, but I'm here to prophesy over you today to say that it's time for you to lift up your head a little bit, for you to gain some strength. Why? Because the Bible says that they that wait upon the Lord, he shall renew their strength. Why is it that you need your strength renewed? Because the rest of that verse says, because we're going to mount up on wings like eagles. We're going to run and not grow weary. We're going to walk and not faint. You see, some of you have allowed your expectations to be too low, so you don't expect anything because you're living in the lowliness when you need to lift up your eyes to the altitude that God wants you to live in. Because I need you to understand something. You see, eagles don't fly in the storm. Eagles fly above the storm. It's time for you to begin to live at the altitude that God created you. You see, what I need you to understand is you got to look to the hills. From where does your help come? My help comes from the Lord. Somebody say, Jesus. You got to use that name. Somebody say, use that name. Somebody say, I'm a name dropper. Use that name. Use that name. Use that name. I get this image of there being a shift in the lame dude's psyche in this moment. It says he expected something. You remember when you first started coming to church and you were like, whoo, I'm so excited. Woo, yeah, I'm excited. The countdown was happening. Oh, I was getting loud up in here. And you were like, oh, yeah, you ready. Woo, yeah. And the people beside of you that maybe have been here for a long time, they said, yeah, that's a newbie right there. She needs to calm her cell phone down up in here. Do you hear what I'm saying? Don't lose it. 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 Because I've seen some of y'all are real excited on other things. Woo, you like just walking around. Yeah. You come into church and y'all like. I just think there were years before this lame dude was probably thought, man, my day's going to be good today. Hopefully I get a few coins. But nothing really happened. And maybe he did get a few coins, but he realized that the few coins just were not going to really help him. And we're not going to really change him. And I think maybe sometimes maybe you're even sitting here today and you're thinking back to when you used to be real excited when you were in church and you watch other people shout and you're like, yeah, I used to shout like that, but now when I shout, I get a ringing in my ear. But the more that I evaluate this story, Kenny, I see something. This man was looking for silver and gold, but yet he got more than silver and gold. Aren't you thankful that when you're not looking for a miracle is looking for you? Aren't you thankful that we serve a Savior that knows exactly what you need? And you think this is what you need, but you got a Savior who's gracious enough to say, no. You need a little bit more than that. Verse 6. Let's go back to where this all started. Then Peter said, silver or gold I do not have. So many times that comma becomes a period. We've got to erase that imaginary period and live according to that comma. Because he said, silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of... You've been looking for some silver and you've been looking for some gold, and that sounds good. But I got something better. And I'm going to use it. Jesus. In the name of Jesus. He said, walk. Jesus. He said, walk. Hold on a second. He gave him a name. He said, I'm going to give you something. You've been looking for silver and gold, but I got something more. I'm going to give you a name. I'm going to give you Jesus. I'm going to give you something more. I'm going to give you some love. I'm going to give you something more. I'm going to give you some grace. I'm going to give you something more. I'm going to give you some help. I'm going to give you something more. I'm going to give you the love of Jesus. I'm going to give you the help of Jesus. I'm going to show you the forgiveness of Jesus. I'm going to talk to you about the salvation of Jesus. I'm going to use a name that is greater than any silver or gold or job or education or certificate certificate or 401k. I'm going to give you Jesus. I don't know if you're hearing me. You see, some of you are going to go to work tomorrow with a person that just absolutely gets on your nerves. That coworker gets all up on your nerves. Why don't you stop giving them grief because they're giving you grief and start giving them some Jesus? Are you with me? You see, can I tell you something? Some of you have a friend that doesn't need another opinion as to how to get out of their jam. Why don't you give them Jesus? Some of you, your kids are driving you crazy. Why don't you give them Jesus? Some of you need to stop giving people hell and call down heaven and say, it's Jesus. Y'all get on up on your feet. Come on, get on up on your feet. Come on. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, use his name. What I love about Peter is Peter wasn't just going to give this guy silver and gold. What good would silver and gold have done for this guy if he couldn't walk home? What good would silver and gold have done for this guy if he wasn't made whole? What good is having a business if you don't have a heart of generosity? What good is having a brand new house if you ain't inviting people over, talking to them about how Jesus has touched your life? Good Lord have mercy. Y'all gonna have me. Verse 7, look at verse 7. Verse 7 says he took him by the right hand and he helped him up. And instantly the man's feet and ankles became strong. He grabbed him by the right hand and he said, Jesus. Hold on a second. He grabbed him by the right hand and he said, Jesus. He said, I came today to tell you something. I want you to get up. I want you to stand up. Peter reached out his hand and said, Jesus. He didn't say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to preach to you a 4-week series. No. He reached out his hand and he said, Jesus. He reached out his hand and he said, get up. I don't know who this is for this morning, but something that I need you to hear in your spirit. It's time for you to say, I've had enough, and I'm going to stand on his word, and I'm going to use his name, and the thing that he's called me, I'm going to walk into. Why? Because his name is greater than silver or gold. His name is greater than riches untold. His name is greater than your past. His name is greater than your present. His name is greater than your problem. His name, somebody use his name.